Welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast, made for women who want their healthiest years to be ahead of them, not behind them. Join your host, Courtney Townley, right now as she breaks down the fairy tale health story you have been chasing all of your life into sensible action steps and lasting change. Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast. This is your host, Courtney Townley, and thank you so much for joining me today. If you've been around the Grace and Grit block for any length of time, you have heard me speak about personal power a lot, especially in 2023, because I'm a really big believer that learning to own, generate, respect, and express our personal power is really the key to our health and happiness. And in the work that I do inside of my Rumble and Rise community and with my private clients, there are 4 areas of focus that I help midlife women work through to reclaim their personal power. And those 4 areas are biochemistry, strategy, mindset, and emotional agility. And today, I'm super pumped that I am joined by my dear friend and functional health practitioner, Laini Gray, to do a deeper dive into that first area around biochemistry. But quite honestly, our conversation will probably go in all the places because we have traveled side by side for so long. And let's face it, ladies, there's a lot that happens on a chemical level, hello hormones, at midlife, that demands a different level of self-care if we really want to rock our second act. So without further ado, Laini, welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast.
Thank you, Courtney. I'm excited to be here. Really excited for this conversation.
Me too. And this is certainly not our first conversation. You've been on the podcast many times before. It's been a hot minute, but you've been here multiple times. And I'd love to start where I start everybody, which is giving you the opportunity to introduce yourself, the work that you currently do in the world, and really share a little bit about how you got into that work.
All right. So way back when, I was a personal trainer, worked in health and fitness, and I loved working with women because helping women become stronger and healthier helped them become more confident in life, right? It just was really awesome. I felt so empowered being able to help women make life really awesome. But then there was this group of women, right, that struggled with my recommendations to exercise more and to eat less. Yes, I'm old enough that was something I taught, right? And these women, usually in their late 30s, early 40s, 50s, were struggling with that. And I was like, why? I don't understand what's happening. And so I had my own struggle with hormones, gut health, some different symptoms. And so in my 30s, I expanded my knowledge base. I became a holistic health coach. I earned a master's degree in holistic nutrition and then became a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, learning all about how to use functional lab testing to understand my own physiology. And this was really important because from that fitness perspective, I was doing all the right things, right? We were counting the calories. We were doing the exact amount of weights and reps and sets, and it wasn't working. And so when I started diving in, I realized my stress was out of control. I wasn't sleeping well. I had gut dysfunction, food sensitivities, all these things. And so this became a really important part of what I was helping women with is how do we reduce our stress, improve our sleep, reduce inflammation, and, put all these pieces together so that we can feel good. Feeling good became better than I just want to look good. Yeah. Right. And so this became a really important piece. And then just naturally, as we age and evolve, I hit this place in my 40s where everything was great. And then all of a sudden, things started shifting again. And I was super frustrated. I was like, what do you mean? I have eliminated gluten and dairy and I'm following this Whole30 lifestyle and I sleep 8 hours a night and I have reduced my stress and I'm gaining weight and having hot flashes and can't remember my name. Right? It was really frustrating. And at the time I was asking for help and there wasn't a lot of great information for midlife women or perimenopause. And so ever since, that has become my passion is helping women understand what's happening in their body during this transition that can start as early as the late 30s, go into the mid 50s, but hormones are all over the place, right? Things are changing. And so understanding what's happening so we can be more strategic about our approach. And so that's what I do now is help women understand they're not going crazy. They're not losing their mind. They're losing their hormones. And there are things we can do about that.
Yeah. And I know one of your big sort of mantras is test, don't guess,
Yes.
right? And that's what functional diagnostic testing really allows you to do. So a lot of people listening today really don't have any idea what functional diagnostic testing is. And so let's just kind of give them the lay of the land. Let's tell them a little bit about what that is.
So when we go to the doctor, right, we usually say, hey, I have headaches, I have something's wrong, and they run some blood work. And let me be clear, blood work is really important. There's some really great information in blood work, but it doesn't really tell us how you're functioning, right? Because your blood work's back. And I don't know, I've had this happen multiple times, and pretty much every woman I've talked to, they say, you know what, I don't feel well, but the doctor said my blood work's good.
Yep.
Right? But they're still tired. They're still having headaches. So we need to use testing that goes a little bit deeper. So when we talk about urine testing or stool testing or micronutrient testing, we're testing on a deeper level, looking at the function, right? Because if you drive in with the car and something's wrong, you can't just get the oil changed. Sometimes you have to go deeper. You have to look at the shocks. You have to look at, I don't know all the parts of a car. So this is maybe,
Come on, Laini.
this might be a bad analogy, but right. But there's a lot of things that can go wrong in your vehicle.
Yeah.
And if you just use one assessment, that's not going to solve the problem, right? It could be there's not enough air in the tire. It could be there's a hole in the tire, right? There's a lot of things. So functional lab testing is really taking a deeper look at how your body is functioning and uncovering opportunities for us to support our body in a different way.
Yeah. So I hear two things in that. Like, number one, it gives you as the practitioner a gateway for treating everybody as an individual, right? Like, let's get to the root of your challenges and not just kind of do the cookie cutter approach to this.
Right.
And so the diagnostic testing really allows you to see the individual biochemistry of the person that you're working with. And secondly, I love the analogy of the car because it does give you a sense that, yes, there's so many things that can go wrong. So when a woman comes to you as a client and is obviously a hot, frustrated mess because she feels like she's doing all the right things and there's clearly something that she's not getting to the root of, what is there like a standard set of tests that you recommend? Where do you start with her? Like, how does that work?
So for a long time, right, with my 20, 30, early 40-year-old women, I said, let's do Dutch testing. Let's look at your hormones, right? There's not a lot of things going on. And I love that. I said, hey, get your blood chemistry from your doctor, that typical CBC, CMP lipids. Those are all really valuable. And let's get a Dutch test. Let's look at what's happening with your hormones. Let's look at your estrogen metabolism. Let's look at your melatonin, your cortisol pattern. And that was really great for that population. But now that women, their entire physiology is shifting, I now say, let's do a Dutch test, but let's do a more comprehensive blood chemistry. So let's look at markers like our A1C or a fasting insulin. Let's look at CRP. What's our inflammation level in the body? There's a lot, what's your vitamin D? For heaven's sake, we need to know these things. Let's look at your iron panel. Let's get a full thyroid. If you're tired and losing your hair, we need to look at your thyroid, right? And these are not typically recommended when you go to the doctor just for your checkup. So the one thing I've been telling everyone now is it kind of feels like you don't know your own body or like you're moving without an owner's manual.
Yeah.
So we can recreate that, but we got to get the data. So let's get a good picture of your stress and hormones and some really great blood chemistry to get started.
Yeah, I love it. So just to kind of reiterate, because I think this is so important for people to hear, because I think people are hearing pieces of this in a lot of places, but you're kind of bringing it all together, which is the functional diagnostic testing. When you work with a functional diagnostic practitioner, can really go to the length of blood sugar, inflammation, hormones, vitamins and minerals, gut health, and probably even other things that we didn't mention. But that's a great foundation for someone to have.
And let's jump in and say that there's lots of other testing, stool testing, all of these different really cool niche tests. I don't start with those, but the one thing you want with a functional practitioner is a really solid intake. Okay, so if I look at your blood chemistry, there are a lot of hints about your gut in typical blood chemistry when you put it in a functional range.
Yeah.
And I always have everybody do a gut questionnaire. Do you have gas? Do you have bloating? Do you have a heaviness in your stomach, right? Are you having constipation? Where are your bowel movements? So we can do a lot. We really have to do that lifestyle assessment as well. There are times when we're looking at things and it seems like nothing's wrong. I've had women come in and they tell me that they've had 12 of their fillings removed in the last year. And their toxicity level, right? We have to think about that. Getting your fillings removed or having root canals, that plays into our overall stress, inflammation. So we really have to get a good picture. So it's that intake form with some really great functional lab testing, and then coming up with that strategic game plan.
Yeah. And everyone's game plan, while it is obviously a little bit different because everyone's biochemistry is struggling on different levels, I would imagine that you see some very common threads among the midlife population. And I'm really curious to know what some of those threads are. Like, what are some of the things that you consistently see in these tests?
Stress.
Yeah, of course. I feel like stress is it's the root of all of it, right? It's like the name of the game here.
It really is. And what we see is that it's not, let's talk about this adrenal fatigue thing. So adrenal fatigue is not a really great definition of what's happening because the adrenals don't really fatigue. The process by which your adrenals and cortisol work just changes. So in the Dutch test, we can see that your adrenals are definitely producing cortisol, but we get to see a pattern of what your body does with that cortisol. And if you've been under chronic stress for a long time, the body can actually deactivate your active cortisol, which is how you get up and have energy every day, and it can shut it down to cortisone. So I see these patterns of high cortisone and lower cortisol. So the adrenals are working just fine, but that body is saying, slow down, sister, slow down.
Yeah.
Right. Because we know what happens when there's too much cortisol. We have inflammation. We have chronic aches and pains. We're sick all the time. Your body
loses muscle mass. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's this interplay. Another thing I see is thyroid function, right? The TSH looks normal, but when we do the full thyroid panel, T3 is low. Mm-hmm. And usually that's related to stress because stress affects your thyroid's ability to function. We see a lot of times I will see liver dysfunction in terms of estrogen detoxification. So we look on the Dutch test and things aren't clearing the body the way they should. This is where we are like feeling more heavy periods and bloating and just feeling like, oh my gosh, this is the worst PMS I've ever had, right? And that's part of the perimenopause. That will happen for a lot of us because of the low progesterone. But if our liver doesn't function well and we don't clear and metabolize our estrogen,
it gets recycled, doesn't it? Into the body.
In the body. And then that brings me to the next part. I have a ton of women who are not pooping.
Right.
We have this conversation every time, Courtney.
Every time we get to poop. We always do. I'm so glad we landed here so early.
Right? It's over and over. It comes out and they're like, oh, I've been constipated my whole life.
Yeah.
Whole life. We're talking you're 48 years old and you haven't had regular bowel movements for 48 years. This is a big deal in midlife because if we're not getting those hormones and toxins out, they're recirculating and getting backed up in the body.
Yeah.
And because we're women, we always think we want to lose weight. Well, guess what? If your liver's not working well and your bowels aren't working well, it's really hard.
Very hard.
To manage your metabolism.
So true. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So good. Okay. So we've said like the big S word, which is stress. And I love, you and I have known each other for a really long time. And I think it's interesting. I think we work very much with the same population in different ways. And we're also kind of working on the same problem, which is the total stress load, right? So stress comes into our life in so many different ways. It's not just mental, it's not just emotional, it's not just the food we eat or the exercise that we don't do. It's all of those things. And so really what I hear you saying is that these functional diagnostic tests are giving us very clear and strategic ways to quickly identify where we need to start unpacking stress.
Yeah.
And so when you see that a woman's liver obviously isn't processing in the way that it should, that maybe that a woman is constipated, that her estrogen isn't metabolizing in a healthy way, how do you know lifestyle-wise where she should begin unpacking stress? Like, where do you go with that?
So, and that's where that intake comes in, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like when you go to the doctor, they only ask you a very few questions. I want to know how often you're sleeping. Are you drinking regularly? So what I see a lot is that women are having a glass of wine every night. That's going to affect both your liver function and your estrogen detoxification. So we kind of have to look at the idea that there's certain stresses we can't remove, right? Our families are family. We love them, even if they cause us stress. Most of us have to have a job. There are certain things that we can't get rid of, but we can change what we're eating. We can change how we're sleeping. We can change how we handle stress.
And we can change how we're thinking about those things that we can't get rid of.
Totally. And so everybody's different. So for some people, starting with the nutrition is great. Other people, it's going to be, let's start with the sleep, right? And that's the reminder too. If we're already stressed out, we're probably not a good idea to start 10 new things.
Right.
Because then we're not going to do any of them well. Right? Let's take a simple step. Is it drinking water? Doing one thing that's going to bring the energy back into our system so that we can heal and move forward. Right? And yes, there are supplements, and yes, there are diet recommendations, but if you're still not sleeping, none of that's going to work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I know you and I've had this conversation so many times in the past, but you and I have both had the great privilege of interacting with so many other health practitioners. And it's so interesting that even though everyone has their level of specialty, doing their, special things, really everyone is kind of coming back to those basic tenets of lifestyle change, which is we have to be getting enough sleep. We need to be eating real food, and we need to be eating enough of it at midlife, which I know is probably something that you see a lot of women neglecting to do. We need to parent our brain. We need to hydrate. We need to have connection. And that's something that I also really appreciate about you is I think that you are always pushing this message of connecting with community, connecting with loved ones, enjoying life, taking time for deep rest. And for a lot of women, they're still stuck in that mindset that those things are luxuries that they can't afford.
Yeah. I think the interesting thing to talk about is when we are in our cycling years, right? And we're in these years that we can have children and we're having a menstrual cycle. Literally our physiology is keyed up to take care of things. And that's why we have this, right? We can take care of a family, we start a new job, we do all of these things. And our hormones are working in our favor at that point for us to go and get things done. And most of us start to notice in our late 30s, early 40s, that it's harder for us to do those things, right? And this is the body, number one, saying slow down. But as our physiology changes, as our hormones shift and we go into that hormone decline state, we're truly supposed to be in the second chapter. And it's supposed to be different.
Yeah.
We're not the same person.
Yeah.
So when we talk about this, really, we have this awesome luxury of moving into this second chapter where we get to be the wise woman, where we don't have to take care of everybody else all the time. We need to take care of ourselves and be an example to those around us. Right. So this is our opportunity to give back and help that younger generation. But that's the really hard thing, too, because if we've been go all the time, we think that's how we're supposed to, be living our life.
And look at cultural messaging. Like it's not, we don't ever get the message that we should slow down and be, enjoying this phase of our life. It's like, no, you still haven't achieved enough and you still have to push harder and you still have to. And, it's so interesting because I do speak so much to personal power. And a lot of women, when they even hear that word, kind of retreat because power to them, they're often thinking of it as more energy out and more effort and more proving. And that to me is not at all what power is. Power is honoring what you really need at this age and stage of life to be a happy and healthy and fully expressed human. And you're absolutely right. That is very different than what it looked like 10, 20 years ago. And we rumble with that hard. Mm-hmm. And I think, and I love this because I see you really working to help women redefine menopause and what the invitation really stands for. And I always say to women, like, you can really fight this. You can be pissed about it. You can resist it and deny it and all of the things, but you still have to go through it.
Yeah.
And if you can retrain your brain to really look at it as an invitation to renovate, which is always a word that I use, right? I always think of this as the renovation years. It's really an opportunity to take a look around and be very honest with yourself about what is working and what isn't, because you don't have a lot of extra resources on board to deal with the things that aren't working. Mm-hmm. So can I ask you from like a personal perspective, what did that look like for you? Like, what are some of the shifts that you had to go through? Because you are menopausal now, right? Like okay.
Yes, I made it to the other side, ladies, and it's great. It's great. It's great. I promise.
Oh, I so look forward to that day. I always ask my provider, I'm like, can we just switch the off button like now? Because why do I have to go through this massive transition? Like, just shut it off.
I know. And I will say, one of my mentors told me once, this perimenopause transition is that opportunity saying it's time for you to relearn something.
Yeah.
It's time for you to relearn. And if you fight it, you're going to have to relearn it longer. Right.
100%.
So for me, what was really interesting is, we talk about all these health practices and we should eat the clean food and we should do this and we should be more in tune with nature and more tuned into our circadian rhythm. For me, that was one of the biggest things that I noticed. I got tired of getting up in the morning and going to the gym to train other people.
Yeah.
And that was my whole life. I was the early riser. I was the early 5 a.m. waitress. I was the 5 a.m. trainer. That's how I lived my 20s, my 30s, and into my 40s. And all of a sudden, as all of this shift is taking place, I was like, you know what? I'm tired of taking care of everybody else at 5 and 6 in the morning when I don't even want to get up that early because the sun's not up. Mm-hmm. And so I stopped.
Yeah.
I stopped. And now I decided I should take care of myself first.
What a concept.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. But it's really interesting because my whole physiology, my whole manner, everything has shifted and it feels really good.
Yeah.
So now I get up in the morning and I have a nice slow morning. I work out at 8 or 9. I clean the house a little bit. And then I don't really start my workday until 11 or after. Mm-hmm. And I work within my energy window. And I prioritize, I want to be done by such and such a time so I can hang out with my husband or go for a walk outside.
Yeah.
So that was a big shift. And just realizing, the things that really matter to me are my family, are my home, are these things, right? And that's a big deal. And as much as I have always loved traveling, and I still do, I actually feel better staying home more often.
Yeah.
And it's okay though, but for so long we start fighting against that. Like we really have to check in and what does that look like? What really works for you and make it happen. Yeah.
And I just want to say that, like, from the outside looking in as your friend, it wasn't an easy transition to like give yourself permission to let go of the early morning clients and sort of transition into a different phase of your career. Like, we're not saying that these decisions are easy to make. And this is honestly why I think a lot of women end up suffering much longer and harder than necessary, because we do have so much wrestling going on with the actual letting go. And to me, that's where self-trust and all the other things come in. Yeah. But that's part of the lesson.
Yeah. And I mean, and then let's go right to the vanity part of it. Yeah. Part of that was having to let go of a certain size.
Sure.
Of a certain body shape.
Yes.
And or I'm going to guess that most everybody listening has been in that place where they're like, if I could just lose 5 pounds, those pants would fit again.
Right.
And after 2 years, right? Stop it. Get a new pair of pants.
Right.
Right. If you're doing the things, and here's, and I just did an article about this interview and I said, even when you're doing all the things, perimenopause doesn't let you get ahead all the time.
Yeah.
Right. There's going to be some shifts. So you do the things because of what Courtney says, because these are good. You feel empowered when you do these. You become powerful and you exercise because you feel good, and you eat well because you're energized, not for the pant size. And you get something instead that you feel confident in. Because guess what? No one has asked me what my weight is for the last 5 years. No one's asked me, oh, Laini, have you gained weight?
Really?
No. Yeah. I wear a bigger size now, right? Do I still work out? Yes. But I also have a different mindset. Do I want to work out 7 days a week? No, I have no desire to go back to that way of living.
Well, and this is the part that I wish everybody understood and could accept, is that there's trade-offs to everything.
Yes.
And part of that wisdom piece that you were speaking to earlier, I truly believe, is recognizing that, I can really have whatever I want, but there is a price to pay for everything. And if you want to spend copious amounts of time in the gym and you want to calculate every bite of food that goes into your mouth, and be hyper vigilant about, constantly keeping tabs on the way your body looks and how much it weighs and all those things, you can do that. And you will not have time for the other things in your life that truly bring you alive.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's really, to me, it's such an opportunity to weigh what is really important to me, because I think midlife is also like, we're a little bit more aware of life not being a forever thing. It's never a forever thing. Yes. But I know this year on my birthday, I was just like, I've always had this like little bit of sadness. And this year I was really investigating it. And I'm like, I think it's because I love it so much. I enjoy the ride so much. And I just feel like I'm creeping closer to the end, even though I hope it's still so far away. And yeah, I'm just faced a little bit more with my own mortality. And that's a gift because it also really makes me consider where I am putting my life energy. And
Totally.
I was in that space too, you know that for years on, body fat percentage and fitness levels and all the things. And man, do I just feel like a radically different person. I still do
Right?
a lot of those things
Yeah.
because I
Oh, yeah.
love it, but I'm not doing it to prove anything. And I'm
Right.
certainly not doing it for a certain number. So I can just
Right.
say that, oh, I weigh the same amount I did in high school.
My earrings are the same as they were in high school, just so you know.
Oh, they are?
My earrings still fit. Uh-huh.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah. Oh, see, I thought that exact pair you had
No,
in.
oh no, not this pair, but
Like, that's impressive. I like that. Yeah, my
right?
earrings still
My
fit.
earrings from high
Totally.
school still fit, right?
Yes.
But the
Oh,
other thing too is that our stresses change. And so with those priorities, the stresses change
yep.
and they're bigger and
Yeah.
they take a lot more recovery.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing too. There's a lot of things that happen in midlife, like parents, losing parents or having to caregive to your parents.
Yeah.
That's a huge stressor.
Yeah.
And depending on where you're at, I was just telling Courtney, our hound dog got hit on the highway 2 weeks ago. So for the last week, I've had to be babysitting this dog and take him outside on multiple walks. So guess what? I didn't lift weights for the last 2 weeks, but I got like 2 to 3 hours outside walking with my dog.
Yeah.
And that was more important. I was trying to keep him healthy. And I was like, you know what? I feel way better going outside 3 times a day than working constantly. And, yes, now I'm ready to work out. I feel like I need to lift something heavy. But there's so many things that change and we have to change with them, right?
And we have to stand face to face with a lot of decisions that we've made. And it makes me think of, I don't remember, do you remember as a kid going to your first ever buffet?
Yeah.
Right. And like your eyes are just so big. You want to taste everything. And you make an effort to taste everything. Like you literally stack your plate a mile high because you can. Right.
Mhm.
That's how I look at like the 20s and
Yes.
30s. Like we're
Mhm.
stacking and stacking and stacking because everything we're so excited and we can build and we can bring in all these responsibilities. And then I feel like in our 40s and 50s, it's like sitting at the table with that mile high plate of food, recognizing that I can't possibly eat all this.
Yes.
Right. So we have
True.
to start making some decisions about what am I going to keep on my plate and what am I just going to save for a later date or maybe just completely scrap altogether because I really wasn't that interested in it or it's not serving me at this point in my life.
Totally. Totally. And I think that's the other thing too, just as women supporting women, we have to be more respectful of everyone's journey, because in our 20s and 30s, there's a lot of that, oh, you're kind of judging people by how they look or
Yeah.
whatever. And so I think that's the thing that we have to just be kind to ourselves and kind to the women around us and understand that everybody's going through something different.
Yeah.
And look at them as the beautiful soul that they are and acknowledge, hey, that must be hard. What can I do to help you?
Yeah.
Instead of, because for so long, what would we say? Well, do you want to come to a workout class with us? Have you tried this diet? We need to get away from those recommendations. Hey, do you want to go for a walk? Let's go for a walk. Hey,
Yeah.
do you want to go to lunch? Like start really reaching out to people on that soul level, on that spirit level, because that's what needs the support. And when we feel that we are supported, in our own thinking and by the women around us, then we become more powerful to take on the next day of whatever it is.
Yeah, I love that you're mentioning this because I feel like a big part of the message I'm always trying to push is that health is so much bigger than our physicality. It's our relationships, it's our mental health, our emotional health, it's all the things. And so, yeah, we have to be starting to look at people as whole humans rather than like a meat sack,
Yes.
right? Like we're so much more than our bodies and what
Yes.
affects our bodies is so much more complex than the amount of exercise that we're doing or the food that we're eating.
Yeah.
And I think that to me, that is not something that I really deeply understood as a woman or even as a practitioner until I really entered my late 30s and into my 40s. And now I just feel like, oh, if people could understand this so much earlier,
Right.
we would
Yes.
save people so much of that unnecessary stress. Okay, I want to switch gears for a second because I want to make sure that we touch on gut health, because I know this is a big piece. I know we mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I think a lot of women, yes, we mentioned the pooping because we always talk about pooping, but can you explain in a little bit more detail, like how the disruption of the microbiome, because you not only know a lot because of your education, but you literally did your thesis on the microbiome, right?
Yes.
I don't know why I remember that, but I do. So yeah, the ways in which our microbiome disruption kind of influences, not kind of, but does influence our hormonal health and our overall biochemistry.
Yeah, so our microbiome is all these bacteria, these trillions of bacteria that live in our, large intestine, and they do a lot of things for us. They outnumber our cells 10 to 1. They help us with our metabolism. They help us with creating nutrients and neurotransmitters, and they help us with getting rid of toxins and excess hormones. So when we produce our hormones, they go through the body, they do their jobs, and then they have to be eliminated. And we actually have a whole series or a system in the microbiome called the estrobolome that is responsible for helping break down the estrogen and get it out of the body. Now, if we have dysbiosis, so if our gut bacteria is not balanced, we actually don't have enough of the good guys to get it out. And so this imbalance actually causes the estrogen to get reabsorbed into the system. We don't get to clear it from our body. So that's just one of the ways that it affects our hormones. But our digestive system as a whole, right now, I would say 9 out of 10 women and men that I work with are low in stomach acid. Okay.
Interesting.
Okay. And so that's the first step of digestion. We chew our food, the food goes into our stomach, and we have these enzymes and this hydrochloric acid that helps us break down our food so it's ready for absorption. Now, as women in midlife, we need more protein, right, to help with our muscle mass. Guess what you need in your body to absorb protein?
More acid.
Stomach acid.
Yeah.
We need more magnesium. We need more of all of our minerals in midlife. Guess what you need to absorb minerals in your body? Stomach acid.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, 9 times out of 10, the women I work with are low stomach acid. So if you have low stomach acid, you're not absorbing your minerals. So you're going to have more of that restless leg, more of the cramping, more constipation, more low thyroid. That's a mineral situation, right? All of these things. So what are we doing here? It's because we're not chewing our food and we're not sitting down to eat. Number one. So really that calming down while we eat is the first step to improving our digestion. And when we sit down to eat, it's easier to put nice meals together and feed our microbiome if we're actually making mealtime this wonderful experience that it should be, with a chance for us to nourish our body on every level.
Yeah.
Right?
Not to mention, I think that when we actually take the time to enjoy our food, we tend to eat less of it because we're actually in the experience of it.
Yes.
And so we're tasting it and chewing it and savoring it and all the things, where if we're multitasking while we eat, we miss the experience. And so we keep eating.
Yeah.
Yeah, so many reasons. So, okay, I have a question about, sorry.
I would say, how often does it happen when you're eating healthy food? Because usually when you're multitasking and eating quickly, it's because you're grabbing something that's probably not the best anyway.
Of course.
Right?
Of course.
So if we can make that a better priority, I like saying make it meditation, right? Be really involved in the experience of eating food.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. And I know that's going to resonate for a lot of people in the community, because we just did a whole workshop on mindful eating and like what it actually looks like to sit down and sort of, taste your food and be grateful for the food and all the things. So is there specific testing that you do for stomach acid?
Okay, this one's going to knock your socks off. Everybody get out your blood work.
Okay.
There is a marker called alkaline phosphatase. It's in your CMP. So it's going to come right after your calcium and total protein and right above your liver enzymes. Usually it's ALK-PHOS, alkaline phosphatase. Now this enzyme depends on zinc. Okay. Optimal, we want it above 70.
Okay.
We want it above 70. 70 to 100 is optimal. Now, that's not going to be what's on your typical lab range. The range is going to be a lot bigger. But when we are lower than that, we're zinc deficient, because you can't make alkaline phosphatase without zinc. So I see that in 9 out of 10 people, myself included a couple of years ago. And then as we look down the blood chemistry, and calcium's a little low, and proteins a couple tenths low, and we start looking at their thyroid numbers, and they're a little bit hypothyroid, which could be selenium or iodine deficiency, right? Everything links back to stomach acid. So when we add digestive enzymes and that include a hydrochloric acid, we can actually bring all those numbers up in a couple of months.
Yeah.
Just because we're able to absorb our nutrients better. So look at that number on your test. I see a lot of people in the 30s and the 40s. Mm-hmm. And those same people have a lot of gas and bloating and constipation. Because if we don't break our food down well in that first phase, the whole digestive system can get disrupted.
Yeah, it makes total sense.
But everything, I mean, all of that. We need stomach acid for our B12. So all of these things, we really have to go back to those foundations because they're so important. And making that one shift can change our entire physiology. That's pretty empowering. That's really empowering.
Absolutely. So I just want to pause here and say that, like, we've talked a lot about functional diagnostic testing. At least we've kind of, scraped the surface of it. We've talked about stomach acid. And I just want listeners to know that you have an opt-in called Top Recommended Testing for Women in Midlife, because we understand that this is a very overwhelming topic, and we want to be able to make it as simple for people as possible. So I will be attaching that link to the page on our website where this podcast is found. So anyone listening, if that is something you're interested in to find out more information about this type of testing, you will be able to find the link to registering for that document on our website. All right. So Laini, we could talk all day long, which is why we're fast friends and we've been friends for years. But what would you like to say in closing about any advice or any one bit of information that you really want listeners to leave with? What would that be?
That I know it can seem overwhelming and frustrating going into this midlife transition because you think you have life all figured out. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you're like, what just happened? I don't feel like myself. I can't handle things. Right. Now I can't sleep. I'm sweating. All of these things start to happen and you're going to be okay. You're not crazy. You're not losing your mind. It's a natural process and there are things we can do. But you have to take, as Courtney would say, you got to take your power back. Yeah. And put, and invest in yourself. So doing all the things, making those changes. And then what I tell people, start a little health savings account of your own so that you can do some of this investigative lab work because it's not always covered by insurance and it's not always recommended by your provider. And that doesn't mean your provider's not awesome. It just means that's not their specialty.
Yep.
Right. And so it's taking responsibility and ownership of how much we want to know about our body so that we can take better care of it. From here on.
I think that's such an important point because I know you and I both, it's so funny. I always joke, it's not funny, but I always say if I was a business coach or I was, selling so many other things that really aren't necessary in life, right? Health is pretty necessary. But for whatever reason, people have a really hard time investing in their own well-being. And I just think of, all the things that we're spending money on that are costing us our well-being, right? The alcohol and the eating out all the time and the, things that we're doing to make up for not feeling good. If we could just take some of that money and dedicate it towards things like diagnostic testing or coaching or whatever it is that's going to help you take better care of yourself, it will reward you tenfold.
Yes.
Because if you don't have your health, you have nothing.
No. And this chapter, it's a gift. Aging is a gift, right? Yeah. And we have to look at it that way. Instead of going, oh, I'm getting older and things don't work the same. Do you really want to be 16 again? No, I don't. Do you want to be 23 again? No. And actually 31, I don't really want to go back there either, right? This is a gift. We made it this far. This is awesome. Yeah. And if we want to keep going, let's adjust our course and go the way that we want to and the way we deserve to and reach out for help. Because guess what? Somebody's going to be there to help us and we just have to reach out.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love you, my friend. I so appreciate you and your wisdom. And there's so many different pathways we could have gone down today, but I think this is a really important one because I think the diagnostic testing can give people a glimpse into information that they probably don't currently have and that could be so instrumental in helping them to ease the frustration of what this transition can cause. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for doing the work that you do because it's so important.
Absolutely. I love it. It's my pleasure. Thank you for listening to the Grace and Grit podcast. It is time to mend the fabric of the female health story. And it starts with you taking radical responsibility for your own self-care. You are worth the effort. And with a little grace and grit, anything is possible.